Okay, so my hesitancy to have done Southland Tales for so long is something. Okay, actually, let me start with a fun point before I forget it and mention it like halfway through the video. I decided to double down on the Sarah Michelle worship here. So I think that I've created like a perfect kind of like spell or a seance. So you got Sarah Michelle Gellar right there. That's one. You got her directly behind me. That's two. You even got her over there. That's three. So I doubled down on it and wore my Sarah Michelle shirt. That's a lot of Sarah Michelles in one room right now. And I'm glad. I don't know why, but I decided to just triple down, quadruple down on the idea that Sarah Michelle Gellar is wonderful. But my main point, my hesitancy with doing Southland Tales and quite a few movies that came out in the 2000s is that okay, so like I was a teenager in this time. Like I grew up with constant discourse about the Bush administration, about the war in Iraq, about all of these fucking things I really didn't feel like ever talking about. But recently, at the time of this video coming out, I did a 30-minute video about how Underworld is about the Iraq war and PTSD. So like I'm on board for I guess Bush discourse again, but that was the primary reason why I didn't want to take it on. And I also don't feel like Southland Tales does the best possible job of investigating uh, any part of this conflict with any ounce of credibility. But I don't think it's a film that strives to be credible. But then I don't know what it's striving to be. Then, like it's
I kind
interesting
of
and it's
agree.
fun and it's subversive, but to what end? Like I don't know. I have no idea like what the point of this movie is apart. Like I have my overall theory of the movie, right? And like my overall theory, I'll just throw it out there, is just that something like by the end of the film, I think that it's about how PTSD can create a double because it's a schism. It through traumatic means it splits the person in half who's experienced the trauma, and like and like the war in Iraq, it's creating doubles en masse. So like all of us have not only like a media self or a spectacle self, but also a trauma self, and we've just been split in half or something fucking dumb. And not dumb. I think it is like an okay idea. I just don't understand the point of the movie at all. I don't know why it exists and why it's so lavish and why it's so complicated and also why it's so sophisticated and then so fucking juvenile at the same exact time. I have no idea.
I
That's a
kind of
lot. But
agree.
but now I'm gonna go back to my throat being bad and you guys just divvy it out.
I,
I put it
I
out there.
I kind of agree. All the because like compared to Donnie Darko, which I think is like at least a remarkably cohesive movie thematically, everything kind of serves the ultimate point it's building towards. It doesn't really stray from that path at any point. And it's also incredibly juvenile, but I find that endearing.
It's about
But Southland,
juveniles, yeah.
yeah, my favorite is the joke about the cigarette. But that's my favorite part. But Southland Tales, I don't really, because half of it seems to be about celebrity culture and like media, and then the other half it kind of forgets about that. It forgets about the movie screenplay plot thread, and it becomes about kind of this Terry Gilliam parody of how politics work. It reminded me of Brazil.
I think
And then
that's
all
the
of a sudden,
perfect comparison. Terry Gilliam, yeah, like Philip K. Dick,
yeah, it
Terry
reminded me of
Gilliam.
Brazil a lot. It reminded me a lot of Brazil. And I kind of viewed everything as endearingly, I guess, symbolic or, like everyone's kind of a caricature on purpose that I don't really care enough to be attached to because I'm more into the ride. But then all of a sudden at the last leg, it like makes this strangely beautiful gesture that I don't know what to do with, and I don't think it really fits into the whole in any coherent way, but it's also kind of the most beautiful thing I've seen all year. Um, like I don't give a fuck about like the romance between The Rock and Sarah Michelle Gellar until they're dancing together, and then it's like the most
Right.
important thing on the fucking planet to me. It's so as like the
Mhm.
guys floating into space. It's wild. It's a very strange ride. I don't really know if it earns it, but I kind of don't care. But I don't know
It
what to make
earns
of
it,
it.
I would say. Like, okay, growing up, I don't know if people are watching this video are like old enough to remember like my first days of discourse on the internet with like film and like the Donnie Darko was the most fucking talked about thing you can imagine. You couldn't go anywhere in like a film community without constant discourse about Donnie Darko. So at like I don't know when it came out when I was like 13 or 14 is when I remember it starting really badly. It was just constantly talked about to a point where it, it's a nauseating it's nostalgic in a very nauseating way. When I think of Donnie Darko,
Yeah.
there is a lot of great to it, but like it gives me war flashbacks of old IMDb boards and not really into that idea. But Southland Tales, like you said, that ending though is so beautiful with them dance. There are so many beautiful parts, but like you, I don't know if it's a film that cares about earning moments, but I know that it's throwing every single thing at a wall. And am I supposed to be impressed by the stuff that sticks or like the mountain of garbage underneath it? Like what am I uh, Jay, Jay,
I don't
hit us with your
exactly
thoughts.
I don't exactly agree with you too on a couple of things. First of all,
Mhm.
I don't really know what this mountain of garbage that you speak of is, because I think, well, I do think that the
I
film
agree.
is very convoluted and hard to follow at times. I understand it more after rewatching it, but at the same time, I don't. I think that part of the idea behind it, and I could be wrong, but the way that I see it is that it is meant to be more of like, an abstract look at like Iraq war, at the Bush administration. And I think that with that in mind, I think trying to make sense of it is kind of defeating part of the point in some ways, like to really kind of parse meaning out of it in terms. And because I do think that as what you're saying, Jacob, about like, you don't care about the romance so much until like it gives you like that moment to really kind of like, embellish. I think that that is mainly indicative of like Richard Kelly trying to appeal to the pathos, because I think this is what it is. You're supposed to understand this more on an intuitive level in some ways, especially as Americans, looking at the way that the United States gets involved with like Iraq, the way that we basically exploit our own people and turn them into these into the military, the way that celebrity culture and also the military like expects people to act in certain ways, to ways that are like separate from who they actually are. And I think that thematically, at least, like a lot of the film is pretty consistent in that respect. Does that make
I'd
any sense
actually
at all?
agree. No, I mean, I'd agree that I will say, like, I don't actually dislike any of this, mo the movie that is. I was into it pretty much from the get-go. It was more, I don't know entirely what it's getting at and if I find that profound. And I'm again running off of Donnie Darko as a baseline to kind of navigate how Richard Kelly thinks about things. Not so much in a like I'm comparing it to Donnie Darko, but more in a I'm using Donnie Darko to understand Richard Kelly so I can try to make sense of what he's trying to do here. Because like again, that's a movie that's so I guess kind of like it's a movie of red herrings in its own way. It's trying to be a bunch of movies that it's not actually any of them. It's just a movie about a kid who wants to commit suicide. So it's like the juvenile. So I feel like it's doing a similar thing here, at least as far as, you watch two trucks have sex in this movie, but which is one of the shots I screenshotted for everybody. But no, but I'd agree. I think it's pretty. Hold on, you drink this. I swallowed something. I think it's. I got something stuck in my throat. I don't know what it was. I do think it's incredibly consistent, at least. Like it's just more the focus of its critique shifts as the movie goes on. And I don't know if it's even trying to form a link between those or if it cares, because it is set up in a chapter structure and it is kind of the very premise of the movie is that it's a series of stories, like disparate stories. So I suppose that's a justification in itself.
Yeah,
especially
but even
considering
with
this
think
is
it's like wildly inarticulate at the same time. Like I can roll with Jay's I think extremely charitable um like reading of the critique, because the critique is terribly inarticulate. Like I can roll with the critique up until the point of like it's making us not who we are. But then the film, like as clearly as I can say anything, doesn't seem to know who anybody actually is to begin with. Like no one is anyone anyway. So I also don't know what it's a
exactly.
fucking
No,
well,
yeah, no,
exactly,
I
but
think that's why it's I think that's part of the thing now is that there is no self in a way, or
well,
it's
yeah,
not till
but if
that
you
very
put no
last
value
moment
on the
that
self, then
self
there's no
is
value
established.
lost.
What's that?
Yeah, but if there's no value placed on the self, and there's no value lost by like committing it to trauma. Like there's nothing interesting or integral or authentic about any character that I see here, like at all.
Jay,
So I don't really know what.
Jay has
Okay,
like
it's that.
mastered
Hmm.
Jay has mastered the art of making a Jacob argument.
What is that supposed to mean?
Which is Zach says exactly what he thinks is terrible. And Jay's like, that's why it's good.
That
Which
is a
is
Jacob argument.
exactly a me argument.
Well,
The
okay,
worst
so
one,
Jacob and I have been down this road before, and I think in my old fucking old age, I'm becoming more and more of a moralist with films. Like I do wonder if things
Oh
are
yeah, and I'm
valuable
the
enough.
opposite. That's right. I forgot.
Well, I mean, kind of. We've talked about this often in movies that talk about a reality being lost or a sense of sanity being forsaken. And if I don't see any value in the reality, like as it stands, and I don't know what you're fighting for, like just kill yourself then. Which is what some
But
of the characters in here come to. Like they come to that
but pimps
realization, and
don't
I
commit
understand that.
suicide. Pimps don't
Oh
no.
commit
yeah,
suicide.
pimps don't kill themselves. They say it like 3 or 4 times, and I've never. It's okay. I think that's pure fucking cringe, and I thought so in 2006. Like Big Pimpin' had come out like 6 years before that. Pimp My Ride was on television. Dude. This is like if a MySpace profile page was given $20 million to make a political statement. I'm like, what the fuck?
That's why it's good.
Okay, I mean, the whole idea is like, so so The Rock basically sees that the double of him, and they say that double had, or him from another timeline is like that he committed suicide. And what he was saying right there is he's establishing himself. He is saying that no, I knew who I am, and that is not within my character. Pimps do not commit suicide. And at the very end, the idea is like you can't that you shouldn't, that it's ultimately better to live, it's ultimately better to establish that self even in the face of dehumanization, even in the face of
No, it is not
militarization.
saying that. It's
Yes, it
not
is
saying
the
that.
very
No,
end.
it's not. No, the
Pimps do
most
not commit
profound moment is
suicide.
when the fucking guy launches a bazooka into a blimp and then just kills himself. That's the most profound moment of the film, and that is direct suicide. And he was a pimp, if I ever saw one.
I, I mean,
We're
No,
I
here for
feel
the
like
pimp
because
discourse.
hey,
I
that
feel
guy
like
killed
it's
himself.
really just. I really think it's just shooting for like a. We've talked about it a lot already, but like new sincerity. Like
Yes.
like all you need is
All you
love.
need to do is love yourself in the end. Don't commit
Yeah,
suicide.
it's
Love yourself. Join hand to hand within
which
yourself. Become one. Establish that
which
self.
is
Don't
Which
become this
doesn't
other
make
person. Don't become
sense.
this other actor. Don't become this other like soldier.
Like
Be yourself and
what you're
be a
describing to
pimp.
me
And
sounds
pimps
like
don't commit suicide.
narcissism, which this film is against narcissism.
Individualism,
So
individualism, which is arguably the
so
same thing. But
no, the cure to narcissism is literally like fucking yourself. It's like holding yourself's hand at the end of the world. Like that's the cure. That's the antidote to narcissism. No, that's ridiculous. I would say.
several different points they say this is how the world ends. They say that at several different points
Then they can't
which
agree
is
on how it does with a whimper or a bang.
because
They can't
it
fucking agree.
constantly ends.
the most Richard Kelly thing again. It's literally the same ending as Donnie Darko,
Oh,
actually.
it's very. You said you don't want to make a comparison to Donnie Darko, but come on.
Oh,
there's time
I gotta
travelers.
say,
There's an eyeless time traveler in two different of his
I
movies.
gotta
Come on.
say, it was running through my mind the whole time because like pretty much every other line is a line about how the end of the world is coming, about time travelers, about multiple selves, which is all exactly what Donnie Darko is. It's just that Donnie Darko is like what if you were like a 16-year-old with bipolar disorder, whereas or something, whereas like Southland Tales is you are in the dreams of the kid with severe mental illness as he grows up watching 9/11 on TV. Um,
Yeah, I don't know
to
about this
be
one.
fair, no, I'm just talking out my ass, but I'm just like it's more subliminal. It's more under the hood. It's more dreamlike in its structure and flow. It's not really
Mhm.
abiding by any logic or rules. Obviously the magic happens at the end. Um,
Just so people don't think that I'm like, and I'm agreeing with Jacob. I think that this is I think Richard Kelly is like one of those directors who has something really profound to say, and like it's about a certain thing, and
he doesn't know how
I
to
don't
say
know if
it.
he knows how to say it. Yeah, exactly. So he's going to try to
Yeah.
say it again and again until the end of time,
Oh, no,
which
I
is fine. F.
100%
Scott
agree.
Fitzgerald did the same thing. But like,
I
just so
100%
people know,
agree.
like, I don't hate this movie at all. I really do like it a lot. Out of its like almost 3 hour runtime, I fucking I enjoy it. I have a great time during it. I have a lot of like arguments with the film subtext, but I really really like the film. And where I think it does really really exceptionally is if we can extrapolate the pimps don't commit suicide thing to actually speaking directly towards soldiers returning from Iraq, and also touch vaguely upon the suicide epidemic that would follow in the returning soldiers' wake. Like this was definitely I think the messaging there is valuable then. Um, Especially when I think that that's when Richard Kelly actually is coherent, is articulate, and is like hard hitting too. I like his investigations into the effects of war in this movie. I'm not really into like I love Sarah Michelle Gellar, but my God, what a weird character. And The Rock also,
Yeah.
but I think that Sean William Scott and Justin Timberlake and the kid with the bazooka, incredible, and those are incredible stories, incredible symbols that really transcend, and the most earned moment in the film is also the most absurd one, with Justin Timberlake lip syncing The Killers in this like defunct bowling alley bar, like covered in blood, and like just like chugging
Drinking.
fucking beers, saying he's got soul but he's not a soldier. Like that's a very earned moment, and I feel like that's the most articulate that Richard Kelly gets, is when he's saying like, and I think he's saying something like so complicated there. We have the ability to transcend the trauma done, but not to undo it. And I think that's valuable and that's really cool. It's just that that makes up maybe 45 minutes of the content of this film.
Yeah. I
I
mean,
do
I do.
I do agree that's the best, that's probably the most strongest part of this film. I do think so. I think he's evaluating similar ideas within like celebrity culture, within kind of sexual
Yeah, he's just
autonomy,
less articulate there,
but
though.
I agree with that. I think that he's much more clear, even though he's also as most absurd when it comes to the actual soldier aspect. I think that that's the stuff
Exactly.
that reminds me of Gravity's Rainbow, which is why Pynchon comes to mind more. But the other stuff, it's really farcical. Do I like those scenes? Yes. But I will say I do have a more difficult time like trying to really parse them out, if that makes sense, like to really kind of like pick them apart. But at the same time, when I'm watching this movie, I'm not thinking so much about, oh, okay, what does everything mean? I'm just more like, I'm kind of more along for the ride. But that ride still is like trying to say something, it is trying to communicate something, even if it's not like always direct. It's still like at least intuitively, and that's kind of it's what I find interesting. But at the same time, I don't know exactly what to do with exactly.
I feel like it's because it's all kind of disparate, tangentially related concepts that are kind of linked together because he, I don't know, read Crying of Lot 49 before writing the screenplay.
Yeah,
And like I really love everything with the neo-Marxist org.
Of course you do.
Because yeah, well, it's this wonderful, farce of like kind of self-obsessed leftists who are all actually individually pursuing completely narcissistic ends. Like they all have completely individual goals that they're kind of just do acting out under the guise of like we're a neo-Marxist org, we're a Leninist org. It's really funny. Like one of
Well,
them is literally working with the cops.
well, yeah, it's critiquing collectivism in some ways, I would say, in that respect.
I feel like
That
it's
collective mind.
more maybe parodying, like
Well, yeah, I mean,
online, not that this was a thing entirely yet, but like Twitter leftists who, 70 flags in my bio Twitter leftists.
I
But
think it's I think it's people
for the
trying to
record,
be.
I am a Marxist, but like I just think it's funny. I think it's funny in context. Especially more because of the farce they're up against. Like you would think they'd be more coherent, and when your opponent is like George Bush or
I
God forbid, Donald Trump, it just kind of feels like it's an easy victory, and then this makes it look like they're completely incapable of taking advantage of that opportunity.
are you suggesting that the film is saying that leftists aren't as organized as they'd like to be?
Yes, I am suggesting that this is what Richard Kelly thinks. Um, Richard Kelly and not me. I
Uh-huh.
would never suggest that. But yeah. No, it's really funny. I mean, one of them is fucking Amy Poehler and her husband, and they both get shot while trying to stage their own deaths by a cop who's working with the communists. And they also there's the whole bit where they have why am I forgetting his name? Roland play a racist cop. This kind of
and it's
what they
really
think a
funny
racist cop would,
though.
yeah, what they think which to be fair, you get that amazing shot. I love that shot at the beginning of him looking at himself in the mirror and the reflections are off. That shot they ripped off from Donnie Darko. It's really good. But no, it actually is. It's a really good sequence. Really, I'm actually surprised by how well the film kind of makes the viewer understand what linked the narratives together by the end. I say that as someone that watched it the one time, like I hadn't seen it before. I feel like by around the last act, I actually kind of like at least understood the broad strokes of like what led from point A to point B, if not completely. Like I don't know why Roland was with the Marxists in the first place, but like I understand like his role in this thing, like that kind of made sense to me. So and same thing with The Rock, like the way these things intersected kind of made sense to me by the end, but it kind of doesn't bother to show you how like they kind of started from that point because you don't really get much in the way of like how The Rock made his way there and like came up with the screenplay as I recall, but you get like everything from that point makes pretty much perfect sense by the end, which surprised me.
Sarah Michelle Gellar and the porn star quartet doing bad cabaret makes sense aboard the blimp.
Yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah,
to
exactly.
me. I mean
Sorry,
that's such a
I
good part. I
mean,
just don't understand why.
oh no, sorry. I'm meaning more like the kind of bulk of the mysteries that accumulate prior to the finale on the blimp, like all like the intersecting plot lines on the beach and in LA at large, like driving
I would
around
agree
trying to
with you
stage
if
the
like such an emphasis wasn't placed on Sarah Michelle Gellar's arc to really just be half considered like completely. I have
yeah,
no idea like the gravity like she's insisted upon just as much as The Rock or Sean William Scott, but her arc is just so half considered. It's like she is this terrible glue trying to hold all these stories together, but it ends up not
yeah,
being too compelling.
a little bit. She's I actually didn't realize until yeah, she is the only one that kind of crosses over each of them in a way,
Mhm.
which makes
And
sense.
but you mentioned the neo-Marxists, and I do love, okay, this movie. We'll talk about the casting and maybe why like later, but it did give me, Sherry O'Terry and Christopher Lambert like fucking fighting each other in an ice cream truck. I never thought I would see like the Highlander and like the chick who did like that cheerleader skit with Will Ferrell like beating each other up in the back of an ice cream truck over buying firearms. That was amazing. John Lovitz is like the cop who she's got her wrapped around her finger. John Lovitz, like you don't cast John Lovitz as like a terribly intimidating figure unless you're doing it ironically. Like I don't understand half of these. No, I don't understand all the casting decisions unless it's meant to be ironic, like completely through and through. But then it doesn't make sense because Amy Poehler's husband in that is a ridiculously good actor. He was in The Wire. He played Barksdale on there, dude. He's so fucking good.
Holy
You think
shit,
like
I
Wood Harris or
forgot.
something. Could be
I
totally wrong.
forgot.
Yeah, he is so good. And like he's here doing a farce. It is a very farcical film, but like I don't understand the decision with this casting. I love seeing these characters here, but it amounts to bad podcast guests in the year 2022. Like these
I,
guys, like
I
I'm
gotta
sorry,
say
that's so
though, in a world where like Inherent Vice has kind of become a darling, like the movie that is, for kind of the same reasons. It's kind of bizarre. I guess maybe the only reason this didn't hit as hard was because like Iraq War was just too close to home, whereas like Inherent Vice could kind of have that kind of ironic distance from
yeah.
its subject matter of time. So because it's basically the same thing.
I'm
I don't know.
watching Janine Garofalo, like General Janine Garofalo, talking to fucking Admiral Kevin Smith in like in a ridiculous amount of
Yeah,
like latex and shit.
that
Like, why am I watching that though? Why is it Kevin Smith? Why does Eli Roth get shot in a bathroom?
I did
Why?
notice that. That made me laugh.
I would have not noticed that if you didn't post it on Twitter. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, I noticed it right away. I was like, is that fucking Eli Roth?
Like, oh my God. But like that said, there's not a single performance in here that I would call weak or bad. Every performer
No,
here gave 1000% to the role and they all
yeah.
pulled it off. It's just, I think it's part of the film's theme, but it's hard to separate the person's spectacle outer image from the character that we're seeing played, which has to be a deliberate turn in casting.
I mean, The Rock has basically become his character in real life since this movie came out.
Mm-hmm.
He literally is that person right now more than he was in 2006.
I'm gonna kill yourself if I'm gonna kill yourself. I'm gonna kill myself if I can't suck your dick, Rock. I'm gonna kill myself right now. I'm gonna give you what you want. What is this
Constantly
movie
saying don't
though?
commit suicide.
Like
Oh yeah,
straight up,
right.
if he came out and said, I wrote this screenplay about the Messiah who saves us because the world is turning slower, I'd believe it. If The Rock said he was gonna do that in real life, I would believe him
I
completely.
can't believe he's pitching the concept that he worked up with Buffy the Vampire Slayer to Stifler and Will fucking Sasso from Mad TV. Like
Yeah,
how
it's I think the idea behind like the casting here is like, I mean, like a lot of these actors would not really be thought of in these kind of roles necessarily, but then they also perfectly embody these roles. I think it is kind of like you don't really think of like, the American Pie guy as like in this role. Even at the time, I don't know
Yeah.
how, like, I know Justin Timberlake was, this is before Social Network and stuff. He was in some things, was trying to be more
Mhm.
serious, but like even him, it's like it is kind of a deviation from where you would kind of think. And Kevin Smith, I don't even know why he's even in this. But
Who?
but
Who?
He's great friends with him. If you get the Donnie Darko DVD back in the 2000s, there was a commentary track from Kevin Smith on it. So I know that they're
Oh,
yeah.
like friends, but at the same time, why the fuck? I don't care that you're friends with Kevin Smith. Kevin Smith actually did fine. Once again,
Yeah.
1000%. He was wonderful. But okay, so like my question, I guess, is to like redirect it to you guys. We keep talking about it being farcical. Is it just 100% a farce then? Is it just a farce? Is this all a fucking farce?
No, I mean
Why
only
not though?
insofar,
Why not?
only insofar as I think there's a lot of, if not truth, at least kind of like authentic, genuine intent behind a lot of the snipes it makes at various, I guess institutions, like I already mentioned like the Marxist, but also just kind of like the snipes it makes against pretty much everybody are
It,
Sure. Then I
mostly
would have to
well
call
well,
founded.
Richard Kelly like cowardly then. I would have to call him cowardly because I feel like every scene can be argued away as farce if it doesn't work.
I suppose, but I don't know. I don't necessarily think it being kind of comic devalues that. I don't even know if that devalues the ending, which is weird to me because it's such a
I'm not saying that satire would devalue it. It would just like change the framing of the argument, and I would be a lot more charitable to it. But I don't think it was intended as like a complete farce. I think it was
no,
like a Terry
definitely not.
Gilliam film, like a
I
Terry
think it's
Gilliam film. But like there are components of farce and satire within it, but
I,
it's
yeah.
making like a very understandable and
I
powerful message.
I think well Gilliam, I mean, well, aside from like Monty Python, I guess, but like I think with Gilliam, he uses farce to kind of support the satire to kind of build upon it. But I think possibly I would like to say that Richard Kelly's doing the same thing, but I would kind of like to entertain the idea that maybe he's kind of looking at this more as a farce, kind of saying that, the state of America, American flags are everywhere here. They're
yeah, it's the
everywhere.
full
Beer
powers
is
doing.
everywhere. It's so in your face. And the kind of everybody's on vanity. It's so like shoved in your face. And what I'm saying is maybe he's kind of using more satire to kind of like build upon the farce, where it's kind of like there is some level of critique here, but overall it is kind of trying to, the main statement is like everything's a gigantic mess. All the organization that the United States insists upon its people, upon people's own perceptions of self, it's all a farce. And I think maybe that's what he's saying. What do you think about that?
I pretty much agree. I think so. Again, I also thought more of Pynchon than Philip K. Dick, but that's because I've read more Pynchon, I think. But
I
uh,
don't
I
think Richard Kelly has. So
I wouldn't be surprised. Although I mean I didn't actually go in. I didn't know anyone had made comparisons to Pynchon before watching it because I kind of went in mostly blind. And I had read Crying of Law 49 relatively recently, and I thought of that
I think
often,
he
mostly
read
because
"Flow My Tears," the policeman said, as is quoted in the
well,
fucking movie, like
well,
by
I
Dick.
bring it up just to say that Crying of Law 49, I wasn't really sure what to make of it other than as a farce or like an oddity as I was reading it
Right.
until I got by the end and I started making connections based on kind of the imagery it chose to use, which is sort of how I approached this, is that I was kind of in it for the novelty until the the kind of separate parts started making connections on their own. Whether or not that's intended, I cannot, in all honesty, say. I just know that I do find those connections, whether intended or not, kind of meaningful in themselves. If
Have
only
either of you,
because, go ahead.
I was just gonna ask, well, you can continue your thought, but I was gonna ask, have you seen Kiss Me Deadly?
Nah.
Oh, have you, Zach?
The Richard Eldridge film's really good.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, Kiss Me Deadly is sampled towards the beginning. And when I realized what that was, I was like, oh hey. And then I kind of started thinking about that film as I was, watching the rest of it. And that film, it is like, it's a noir film, but it kind of deviates and it kind of like into somewhat surreal, and that and I think that he probably took influence from that quite a bit. I would probably say, um, where like there's a level of like genre bending, not kind of like adhering to like a strict kind of formula. And I think part of that is he's establishing his own identity, his own like individual kind of like you know view of the world in a way, and by kind of like picking apart everything else and kind of just showing like, yeah, this is a gigantic mess, but it's a beautiful mess. Even within this mess, we can find something within ourselves. And I think that it's a very individualist kind of like approach. And I think he's very much like, even if the neo-Marxist are more in, even if they are kind of, you know, on the right track more so than the Republican Party or the military, I think that he is trying to say that like there's a inherent flaw within kind of like, you know, this kind of like collectivist kind of like anti-individualist framework, and where I think he's aiming for that individualism, both as an artist and also like just in general. I think that that's what the film's politics are. But there's also some room for disagreement there, I think.
It's also worth mentioning that this is like part of a multimedia project he had planned. Like the
That's
opening
true.
of the movie literally says chapter 4. Like the movie is the second half of a planned story that he didn't actually
That's
get to
like
make.
Star
I don't
Wars.
know.
Well, he made
Yeah,
like
he
some graphic
literally.
novels or something. I haven't read that
Yeah,
though.
so his plan was to expand, show like chapters 1 through 3 in another format of some kind, but then Southland Tales bombed to all hell, and he got like the Dennis Hopper treatment and got, you know, booed out of ever working again until he made the Fox, and then he once again got booed out of ever working again until now, when Southland Tales
Well, now
kind
he's
of
like
got a
thinking of like,
second life.
has he
Yeah, Southland
released?
Tales has suddenly gone in like a second life because of its re-release and because he got to drop the can cut and everything. So he's kind of back in and he's trying to work on it again. So he's gonna release his original material he had planned, I think, as like an animated thing online.
Well,
And
isn't
he
there
also
like
has others.
isn't there like a 4-hour cut of the film that's coming out at some point?
Probably. I wouldn't be surprised. He's a psychopath and probably a narcissist, so I wouldn't be surprised. But yeah, so I don't know. It's weird because this isn't the kind of thing you normally try to make like a multimedia project out of, if that makes sense. Like frankly, I think like Donnie Darko would have made more sense for that. Like I feel like that's kind of like a Blair Witch type deal where I can think of all sorts of things you can do with it. Southland Tales, it seems like the joke is so obvious and self-contained that I don't know how you would even desire to expand it beyond its initial thing as a movie. I don't know what more you would do with it because it seems like it said everything it can or would be able to say. I don't know if Richard Kelly has any other thoughts about these topics.
I
So
mean,
I don't know what he would do.
I kind of also like the fact that the film just begins like in the middle, and because
Yeah, it's an
it
incomplete.
makes it more farcical. It makes it more like kind of like, you know, flipped on its head and postmodern, and that's what kind of what I like a bit more.
Oh yeah, it's definitely a very kind of like, you know, I guess like Tarantino type touch. It's a very, you know, like pop thing for that era, especially after the 90s and 2000s. I'm thinking of Pulp Fiction just because it's completely out of order in Pulp Fiction. And I feel like he's probably inspired by that kind of thing.
Probably to
Uh,
some extent. I mean, he was really making his own type of thing, though.
I agree, I agree. But I just mean like it's kind of the trend at the time. Or at least, you know, I heard there was this whole postmodern thing in the 90s that some people are interested in and other people are not. But
It's a lie. It's a myth. Never existed.
you know, I mean, he doesn't really have a precedent for that, I guess. But so this is kind of Richard Kelly just going out on a limb and throwing it all in, seeing what happens, taking a shot.
Well,
Yeah.
yes,
He'll suffer
but
for it forever,
I think he's
and
still
he'll never
forming.
recover from it.
I think he's still forming a thesis here, but I think that that thesis statement there is like several sentences, and they're, or it's a giant run-on sentence of that thesis statement there. That's what I would say.
Oh, yeah, that's kind of what I mean. Is I feel like Richard Kelly has a more or less coherent worldview and a more or less coherent kind of sense of his own politics and morals, and he's just kind of compiling all his disparate thoughts. They all come from the same source, so I feel like they are coherent in the end. It's just he's not cinematically making them coherent because he doesn't really
No,
care enough to, and I don't think he
I
has
think it's
to. But
okay. Well, it's incoherent on like the in terms of the narrative at times, but I think
oh
like
yeah, I'm using that
on
word
an
in a super
intuitive.
superficial way.
Okay, well, but in an intuitive level, I do think that there is a coherency and kind of a common thread that strings together.
Yeah,
I think this is a very competent work. I think. I don't
100%.
know exactly what he's
I think
going
so.
for, but this is I can only but I think it's a pretty good
I
movie.
guess I think this is the only movie Southland Tales could have been. I say that as it has at least 3 cuts in existence, but like this is Southland Tales had to be this. It wasn't gonna be anything other than this. In the abstract, I guess.
Well,
But
the con cut is not that different from
that's a question
from
for
the
Zach.
theatrical,
Zach watched. I
honestly.
didn't get the chance to.
Like we were discussing this a little bit before we started the Zoom call, and it's like there's some scenes that are longer, and there's different music, and like some scenes are come a little bit before. I think I think the one that hit the festivals is better than the theatrical cut. But like just in terms of pacing,
I
but
heard the opening's different. Like it doesn't
yeah,
have
but
a
it's
big
not that much
montage.
different. Like there's some it's just longer. Some scenes are not. It's not everything is there, and some things are longer and rearranged. It's not like a difference between like Joss Whedon's Justice League and Zack Snyder's or anything like that. Like those are like very different movies. This is very similar. Even like the Godfather Coda is a lot more similar to Godfather Part 3 than like this, or so sorry, this is like even more similar than that, if that makes sense.
Fair
But
enough.
pretty good though.
I had
I did like it. What are some of your favorite like scenes in it? Some of the best visuals you would say.
pretty much the
Absolutely. The ending is great, but I do think the best scene is, I think it's the same thing that you think is the best scene, and that's Justin Timberlake with that like that bloody V on or uterus or whatever
yeah.
the hell that is on it on his white shirt, singing "I got I got soul, but I'm not a soldier" with those it's such a farce. It's so like it's basically like he's in this state where he's like, okay, with the liquid karma, you talk to God, and then you basically like in this like state of mind, you've transcended the nonsense bullshit world around you, and now you find yourself, and I think that's kind of what it is.
I
Because
am
in
in.
the end, he's not a soldier. He's not what everybody else tells him to be. He's not like part of this giant unit. He is a soul, and I think that the use of the killers is pretty like
He's
great.
he's Roland's best friend, right? That's
I
what he
was
is at
gonna
the end
say
of the
that's
film.
my favorite line actually at the end is him saying he's my best friend. I love that.
So that Justin Timberlake scene is something I remembered from like when it came out when I was like around 16 or 17. I remember that scene being awesome. What I completely forgot until I rewatched it recently for this video was even that Bai Ling was even in the movie, but also like how committed Richard Kelly was to Bai Ling being this sort of like source of like cinematic integrity throughout the film. There's an amazing steady cam or like tracking shot of her walking through the blimp, like
I
all the
love
way up
that.
to the stage, and it's such an incredible shot. And like Bai Ling, I don't know if she was like if there was a lot of choreography to what she was doing, but man, she was killing it. Like the fluidity of her motions and
I
like the
I
uniqueness to it. It was
I could
incredible
be
seeing
wrong,
Bai
but
Ling here.
I could be wrong, but I believe the cam cut or I think the theatrical cut actually cuts down on her, if I'm not mistaken. So there actually might be a difference there, and there is a more emphasis on her, and I think it's quite interesting what Kelly is doing with her, but I think
Yeah.
there's like this rhythmic like dance in a way, and
Yeah.
how she
Well,
moves.
I think that what he's doing with her is like there's a lot of farce with her, making out with the Princess Bride inconceivable guy. But
Conceivable.
there it's more artful than it is farcical, like with at least capturing her like in movement, not necessarily like the weird confrontation she has with the Rock near the end of the picture, which is farce. But when he's allowed to just like, I don't know, he's tapping into Bailing there with something that I've seen her in a lot of films and TV shows, and no one else really taps into that weird idiosyncratic like quality like of her physicality that's not just like sex appeal. It's far different. It's unique. It's alien, right? So it fits into this like science fiction sort of world. And I was really impressed by the choreography of Biling, but also by Richard Kelly's commitment to capturing her in a way that was really like interesting and purely cinematic. So good on you, Richard, I guess. What?
Yeah.
What?
Who?
You guys, what?
No, I agree.
I agree.
Do you?
What?
You guys,
No,
I've been wondering this for a while now. Is teen horniness a crime?
Teen horniness is not a crime.
no.
And we are a
Not a crime.
bisexual nation in denial.
Living in denial.
Okay, so
Living
Sarah
in
Michelle's
denial.
character Krista now was like, I think like arc wise, narrative wise, like really weak and half considered, but she made me laugh maybe more than anyone. Her lines and the dedication that
She's
Sarah
like
Michelle Gellar has in these moments is incredible, dude.
she's like she reminds me of and this is gonna sound backhanded, but I say it because I admire the performance I'm referencing. She reminds me of Elizabeth Berkley in Showgirls, which is like one of my top 5 performances in film,
Do you think
probably.
Verhoeven was a influence here?
Actually, yeah, I forgot to mention that. I thought of that pretty much the entire time I was watching.
That
It
makes
reminded
sense.
me a lot of RoboCop and probably more obviously Starship Troopers.
Yeah, that's what this.
It reminds
Okay.
me a hell of a lot of Starship and no, it definitely, definitely, definitely. It
And
reminds
before
me
I
of
lose
him.
it, Jacob, what was your favorite like visuals of the movie? Your favorite sequence, if you had one, and
Pretty
then
much
go
the
on
whole
with your thought that I cut you off of.
pretty much the whole finale. I was like crying during that shit, which is funny because
Awesome.
I didn't
Oh,
expect
were
to
you?
have that
Okay.
reaction even at like the 90-minute mark. I was like, yeah, this is really good. And then I watched the Rock dancing with his wife and Sarah Michelle Gellar, and I was like,
Watch the other cut. It's better.
it was the song. I was like, oh my God, this is beautiful. And then it cuts to the dude with the bazooka rising up into the sky. I fucking loved that.
An
That
ice cream
was
truck. Yeah.
remarkable to me. I was really emotionally moved by that sequence. I thought it was pretty
Is
fantastic. It to the point that it kind of repainted my opinion of the whole movie. It moved me so much.
is RoboCop a farce? Is like Verhoeven? What kinds of films would you say
It's
he makes?
satire. Satire. I don't think it makes farces. I think
It's always hard to say because like Showgirls is, I mean, my experience
it's
of Showgirls was
satire.
like I saw that in a theater and everyone was laughing a lot because it's a really funny movie. And then in the last 30 minutes, everyone was dead silent because suddenly it becomes incredibly dark
It's
and
satire. I don't think
it is,
it's
but it's also like literally in its last act, one of the darkest movies probably to come out in that year. It's like incredibly dark, very serious. Like suddenly in the last act of Showgirls, it takes its subject matter deathly seriously, and but it also kind of earns that for me, that shift. In that
well, I know what
it
we'll have
does,
to cover sometime, but
yeah, it doesn't feel that jarring to me when it happens. So I don't know. And I think Verhoeven, I don't know how to say his name correctly, is really good at that kind of thing because RoboCop is obviously a joke to some extent, but then it's also what it's addressing is very serious, you know? I mean, it's
Yeah.
dealing with police and acts of violence the police commit and
Well, I
trying to
thought of
make the
like Total
police,
Recall here for sure, like which was based on a
yeah,
Philip
that
K.
too.
Dick novel. So
Yeah, exactly. Total Recall too, for sure, for sure. It's I think he's really good at those kind of shifts in tone where it's kind of like a joke, but also very serious. And I feel like you never really mistake that. I feel like even the most like, I guess, inconsiderate viewer kind of that registers for them. I say that because again, like I saw Showgirls in a theater, and I love the movie, but I know for a fact that like 90% of the people there were there for the bit, for the joke. But then no one was like laughing for the last 30 minutes because it's like it stops being funny. So I don't know. He's a
So,
very strange director, and I really
so-
admire him for that.
yeah. So Richard Kelly has cited his influence as including Philip K. Dick, Terry Gilliam, T.S. Eliot, uh, the guy that did Slaughterhouse-Five. So like, and
yeah, Vonnegut.
I can see it.
That guy,
Yeah.
I forgot.
I can see Vonnegut in here for sure.
Vonnegut,
T.S.
yeah.
Eliot, like, is he really an influence, or did you just quote him 12 times in the movie? Like, this is the way
Well,
the
I
world
mean,
ends.
I
Fair
mean,
enough. I
No, I agree. I'm not obviously not arguing with Richard Kelly with you as a proxy right now.
And again, like Donnie Darko also kind of does that. By the way, Donnie Darko is like really fucking comic for most of its runtime. There's a whole sequence in that movie about about how the Smurfs procreate.
Oh, I haven't seen it in a while, but I remember.
Yeah, and but then at the end it's literally about like a teenager who, chooses to die for and
Yeah.
uh it's
But is Donnie Darko not a pimp?
fair enough.
no, but but the thing is, I think he's making I think he's distinguishing suicide, where basically you give up, you lose yourself, you end yourself, from martyrdom. Because I think like even with The Rock, he basically does the Jesus pose towards the end, and I think he is like distinguishing like martyrdom from suicide in that respect.
It's unclear.
Bazooka guy's that's quite unclear, because like, um but I do think it's like, you can die for a cause, but like, don't die, or try not to end your life just because of the world, basically. Like, you should try to, it's better to live on, is what it's saying, because what's best
Well,
in
sure, but
life
it's like
is,
Sean William Scott's like, don't kill yourself now, kill yourself in 30 minutes. Like, essentially.
It's hard to say. I feel like the way Donnie Darko deals with like suicide is much more coherent and kind of complicated, and it doesn't really
Yeah.
give you any moral or answer about it. It just kind of says this is how it is for this person. This is how this person experiences that way of thinking. Whereas Southland Tales gives like 7 different accounts of
Yeah,
how
and
that can be
I'm
experienced,
agreeing
and like
entirely. Yeah, I'm
yeah,
agreeing entirely with Jay. I'm not like
yeah,
interjecting there to be a jerk. That
yeah,
bazooka guy really just fucks up a cohesive reading, Jay's cohesive reading of the movie. The
yeah.
bazooka guy just fucks it up completely. I agree. I
I'm
agree that I think is the overall goal of the movie. It's just that Jay brought it a lot of kind of like problems here. So like martyrdom, can it also be defined by killing hundreds of like mostly innocent people on a blimp, or is no one innocent and deserves to be blown up?
yeah,
Like,
but I don't
it's to
even,
the point.
honestly.
It's to the point that like I almost feel like the second The Rock leaves I also love how we never call him by his character's name. We're just calling him The Rock, which to be fair is
Fine.
because he
exactly his
doesn't even know
name.
his name. Is he
But
Jericho Kane or Boxer whatever?
Her coke.
I'm almost liable to think that the second The Rock like steps out of the elevator and into a long take, we have like exited reality. Um,
I could.
because the whole end of the movie feels part of like a completely different like reality than everything that came before it. So I don't know, but I guess that's just part of the vibes it's trying to establish. He's definitely more concerned, I think, with the vibes than kind of any internal or like
So,
data consistency.
I'm looking at this interview real quick here, and just to clarify something. Kelly has said that he was inspired by Philip K. Dick, but he also was inspired by Pynchon, directly when he was making Southland Tales, and he calls it a satire. we felt like we were making a bold satire of the Bush administration and of celebrity and pop culture. Okay,
Fair enough. I mean,
so
yeah, fair enough.
Well, okay, so you just
This
mentioned
is what
vibe,
it felt
Jacob. What do you think the vibe is?
mid 2000s.
What
This
is
is
that
this
vibe?
is what this is what it felt like to be 10 years old in the 2000s,
Okay.
which is I was 10 years old when this came out, to dox myself. Um, and this is probably how the world felt to me from, this is what the world continues to feel like to me, which is
world
not
ending.
necessarily like that's not no, yeah yeah, the apocalypse, but also I just mean, this kind of cacophony of noise of
Yeah.
different, all these
Oh,
competing ideologies and
right. And then the
just
nation's
world
trying to
noise.
establish its own identity in the face of in the face of terrorism, but at the same time we're also stripping our own individuals of their identities and of their
Funny,
selves, and we're exploiting
funny
them.
enough, I
This and the whole amnesia thing is like it's a literal like loss of self based off of memory. When it comes to PTSD, it's like you went through you basically went through the worst. You may have even done the worst. And like, can you come out of that and continue living onward in this um world where you're barely even allowed to be a pimp? Uh,
Funny enough, I feel like this movie is like almost completely disinterested in the idea of terrorism or terrorists, which is probably puts this apart from
no,
something
it's
like
interested in the
a Spielberg
response.
movie.
I think it's
Yeah.
interested in the cultural response of trying to organize, um, and basically
Well, funny
self-destructing
enough,
in the process.
well, we say it, but isn't the inciting incident of the film like an actual like nuclear attack
Yeah. And
by like an
Emily.
actual nation? So this is definitely, I don't think, about even response to terrorism. I feel like Richard Kelly's just saying America's kind of just like this, and Bush just kind
Well,
of made that
well, well, well,
obvious to everybody.
well, yes, but but it's still a commentary on the post 9/11 landscape
You're
of the
right.
Bush
You're right.
administration. With surveillance and all that. Um,
You're right. You're right. Yes.
but I
I
do
say
think
that.
he's trying to say something more like beyond that too, because I don't think he's actually necessarily interested in like what exactly we're doing like in Iraq or and so on and so forth. I think it's more
I
like
say that I mentioned it just to say that like he's not. This is probably in his benefit because I'm sure I don't need to hear or want to know Richard Kelly's opinions on the Muslim world. So I got enough of that from Spielberg. So
oh,
I don't know if I need any more kind of uncomfortable takes from white guys from Hollywood, but just it does also, on the other hand, make it feel kind of solipsistic, or kind of, because it's all just about America internally from the mind of America. So it's borderline an ethnographic film at that point. It's a very kind of insulated view of the world, but I guess that makes sense given its subject matter, because it's about, a lack of self, a lack of identity, which I suppose is the defining characteristic of an American. So I don't know.
Mm.
yeah.
Which is probably
Um,
why I'm drawn to these kinds of narratives.
I'm just browsing the web for a moment. Apparently, I was curious. I typed in Richard Kelly and terrorism, and apparently at one point, the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of Homeland Security thought he's like a suspected terrorist in some ways, or has links to terrorism. That's all
Well,
I'm going to get
damn. I
into.
know he drops bombs, but I thought they were only movies. Am I right?
Oh, that's good.
Just Jay going. So I looked up Richard Kelly terrorism, and you're not gonna believe this. It's just one of those pictures of Osama bin Laden in his cave shaking hands with Richard
Yeah.
Kelly.
Yeah,
With the copy of
2015.
Southland Tales going release the can cut.
Oh no, this is gonna be
2015. Yeah, he was
another
under investigation as being a terrorist.
This is going to be our second urban legend moment where the director sees the video and gets really
I'm
mad
gonna
about
tag
what
him
he
on
said.
Twitter. I'm gonna tag him on Twitter.
Do it.
I'll edit this down a little bit so you can watch it, and then like I'll tag him on Twitter. I want him to
Richard
watch it.
Kelly's gonna be like, I
Richard
really
Kelly, if you
enjoyed the
see this,
video.
tweet it out.
Well,
Okay.
I hope that
Richard Kelly's
fucking
gonna
urban
say, I really
legend
enjoyed the
guy.
video. I
I hope
really
urban
enjoyed the
legend
video
guy
until you
knows that
called
we
me a
would have
terrorist.
done. You and I would have done Valentine, Jacob, had fucking urban legend guy didn't like think we were bullying him.
I tried to preface it so well so he would take it in stride. I was like, we're really big fans. We talk about you constantly. And
For
then
those who don't know, Jacob and I did like an hour-long analysis of Urban Legend, which is so charitable, so nice and glowing of him, except for the opening 30 seconds where I make fun of his name. And that's it. And he's like, they made fun of me. They like like Jamie
Yeah.
Blank's
He's
not a
like,
big fan of your cult boyfriend. We've had a breakup.
it's
But
fine.
I think
But
Richard Kelly has thicker skin. You would have
yeah,
to if you
Richard
put out
Kelly's
Southland
gonna be
Tales.
like, Richard Kelly says, I really liked your video until you called me a terrorist.
no, I'm not calling him a terrorist. I'm calling him
I
a
am.
pimp. And as we know, pimps do not commit suicide.